Then Jacob called for his sons and said, "Gather around so that I can tell you what will happen in days to come." So we just had a prediction about Manasseh and Ephraim. Now we're going to have predictions about the rest of them. And again, this is one of those things that will cause the smart people's heads to explode. It's like, well, that can't possibly be. They had to have been writing this down 1,000 years later after they already happened, because they're like, blah, 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 blah. Assemble and listen, sons of Jacob. Listen to your father Israel. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, the first sign of my strength, excelling in honor, excelling in power. Turbulent as the waters, you will no longer excel. For you went up unto your father's bed, onto my couch, and defiled it. So Reuben is disqualified. Out the door he goes. Simeon and Levi are brothers. Their swords are weapons of violence. Let me not enter their council. Let me not join their assembly. For they have killed men in their anger, and hamstrung oxen as they pleased. Cursed be their anger so fierce, and their fury so cruel. I will scatter them in Jacob, and disperse them in Israel. Levi is never going to get his own territory in the land. They're going to be the priestly tribe that has to live within the land allotted to the other tribes. I'm not so sure about Simeon. Simeon gets a small chunk of territory within the greater territory of Judah. They're not really sure how that means they're going to be dispersed. Judah, according to the footnotes down here, sounds like and may be derived from the Hebrew for praise. Judah, your brothers will praise you. Your hand will be in the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down to you. So not going to be bowing down to Joseph any longer. In the future, they're going to be bowing down to Judah. You are a lion's cub, O Judah. You return from the prey, my son. Like a lion he crouches and lies down. Like a lioness. Who dares to rouse him? The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he comes to whom it belongs. And to the obedience of the nations, it says. So there is a direct mention of this coming future ruler. Our first actual mention. I mean, we had it way back in the seed promise of Genesis 3:4-15. But this was the first time we really identified some future ruler coming that will rule the nations. Or the other alternative way of saying it, according to the footnotes down here, is until Shiloh comes, or until he comes to whom tribute belongs. Until he comes to whom it belongs, and the obedience of the nations is his. He will tether his donkey to a vine, his colt to the choicest branch. He will wash his garments in wine, his robes in the blood of grapes. His eyes will be darker than wine, his teeth whiter than milk. I'm not sure what that means exactly. Zebulun will live by the seashore and become a haven for ships. His border will extend towards Sidon. Issachar is a raw-boned donkey, or a strong donkey, lying down between two saddlebags, or campfires. When he sees how good his rest is his resting place, and how pleasant is his land, he will bend his shoulder to the burden and submit to forced labor. Dan will provide justice for his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan here means he provides justice. Dan will be a serpent by the roadside, a viper along the path that bites the horse's heels so that his rider tumbles backwards. Interesting contrast. I look for your deliverance, O Lord. Gad can mean attack and band of raiders. Gad will be attacked by a band of raiders, but he will attack them at their heels. Asher's food will be rich. He will provide delicacies fit for a king. Naphtali is a doe set free that bears beautiful fawns. So he utters beautiful words. Joseph is a fruitful vine near a spring, whose branches climb over a wall. or Joseph is a wild colt near a spring, a wild donkey in a terraced hill. With bitterness archers attacked him. They shot at him with hostility. But his bow remained steady. His strong arms stayed limber. Because of the hand of the mighty one of Jacob, because of the shepherd, the rock of Israel, because of your father's God who helps you, because of the Almighty, the Shaddai, who blesses you, with blessings of the heavens above, blessings of the deep that lies below, blessings of the breast and womb. Your father's blessings are greater than the blessings of the ancient mountains, than the bounty of the age-old hills. Let all these rest on the hand of Joseph, on the brow of the prince among his brothers, or the one separated from his brothers. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning he devours the prey, in the evening he divides the plunder. The Benjamites are going to be the best fighters in Israel later on. All these, the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is what their father said to them when he blessed them, giving each the blessing appropriate to him. Then he gave them these instructions. I am about to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave in the field of Ephron the Hittite, the cave in the field of Machpelah, near Mamre in Canaan, which Abraham bought as a burial place from Ephron the Hittite along with the field. There Abraham and his wife Sarah were buried. There Isaac and his wife Rebekah were buried. And there I buried Leah. We didn't read about Leah's death, or Rebekah's for that matter. I don't know when Leah is not listed as one of the ones who went down with him to Egypt, so she must have died before that. The field and the cave in it were bought from the Hittites, or from the sons of Heth. When Jacob had finished giving instructions to his sons, he drew his feet up into the bed, breathed his last, and was gathered to his people. Joseph threw himself upon his father and wept over him and kissed him. And I guess he also did this because God told Jacob he would. Then Joseph directed the physicians and his servants to embalm his father Israel. So they're going to mummify him. So the physicians embalmed him, taking a full 40 days, for that was the time required for embalming. And the Egyptians mourned for him 70 days. When the days of mourning had passed, Joseph said to Pharaoh's court, If I have found favor in your eyes, speak to Pharaoh for me. Tell him, My father made me swear an oath and said, I am about to die. Bury me in the tomb I dug for myself in the land of Canaan. Now let me go up and bury my father, and then I will return. Pharaoh said, Go up and bury your father, as he made you swear to do. I'm not sure why Joseph is not approaching Pharaoh himself here. Maybe at this point he's no longer in Pharaoh's court. Maybe after the famine was over, he retired and was no longer directly and had access to Pharaoh. I'm not sure. Maybe. I don't know. Pharaoh seems to still have a high opinion of Joseph. But it's interesting that Joseph has to speak to Pharaoh's court now instead of Pharaoh himself. So Joseph went up to bury his father. All Pharaoh's officials accompanied him, the dignitaries of his court and all the dignitaries of Egypt, besides all the members of Joseph's household and his brothers and those belonging to his father's household. Only their children and their flocks and herds were left in Goshen. Chariots and horsemen also went up with him. It was a very large company. Or chariots and charioteers. When they reached the threshing floor of Atad near the Jordan, they lamented loudly and bitterly. And there Joseph observed a 7-day period of mourning for his father. When the Canaanites who lived there saw the mourning at the threshing floor of Atad, they said, The Egyptians are holding a solemn ceremony of mourning. That is why that place near the Jordan is called Abel Mizraim. Abel Mizraim means mourning of the Egyptians. Remember, Mizraim is the word for Egypt. He was one of the sons of Ham, and probably the first pharaoh of Egypt. He would have moved down there probably after the Tower of Babel incident. It's probably the same guy the Greeks called Menes, the first recognized pharaoh of Egypt. So throughout the Bible, we're going to see the word Mizraim applied to Egypt, or the Egyptians. So Jacob's sons did as he had commanded them. They carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave in the field of Machpelah, near Mamre, which Abraham had bought as a burial place from Ephron the Hittite, along with the field. After burying his father, Joseph returned to Egypt, together with his brothers and all the others who had gone with him to bury his father. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "What if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs we did to him?" So they're still worried about that. That's still in their minds. I mean, Jacob himself even kind of mentioned it in the blessing he gave to them all at Joseph's part about being attacked. And that their consciousnesses are still pricked by that. So they sent word to Joseph saying, "Your father left these instructions." Your father, not our father, but your father. Remember, he's your father, Jacob, or Joseph, excuse me. "Your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and the wrongs they committed in treating you so badly. Now please forgive the sins of the servants of the God of your father." When this message came to him, Joseph wept. He still hasn't. This is still an issue for these guys. His brothers then came and threw themselves down before him. "We are your slaves," they said. But Joseph said to them, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then, don't be afraid. I'll provide for you and your children." And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. Joseph stayed in Egypt along with all his father's family. He lived 110 years and saw the third generation of Ephraim's children. Also the children of Machir, son of Manasseh, were placed at birth on Joseph's knees. That is, they were counted as his. There's a footnote down there. Because Ephraim and Manasseh, those two sons were supposed to be Jacob's sons, counted as Jacob's. Everything after that was counted as Joseph's. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "I am about to die." Now Joseph was the 11th of 12 brothers. But apparently he died fairly early. 10 of them would have been older than him. But apparently a lot of them outlived him. Now again, the age difference wouldn't have been very large. The age difference between him and the others wouldn't have been too huge. And they may not all have outlived him. Of the 10 older brothers, some of them may have already died. But clearly several of them outlived him. "I am about to die, but God will surely come to your aid and take you up out of this land, the land he promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." And Joseph made the sons of Israel swear an oath and said, "God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones up from this place." So Joseph died at the age of 110. After they embalmed him, he was placed in a coffin in Egypt. I'm going to go ahead and stop there. I think that's just a good place to stop. The end of Genesis. Okay, now, so I read through basically that entire section in this one day series of videos. Didn't really stop the I mean, it's a long, straightforward story. I mean, it's a pretty easy read. I mean, there's not a lot of interpretive details that really need to be mentioned in that part of the Bible, because most of it is just a straight up story. Here's what happened to Joseph and all them. And I mentioned a few things about like some of the deeper meanings of things that we did pass, but so that's the conclusion of the Joseph story, and the next time we're going to get into Exodus. However, I do think it's now not in this particular lesson. I'm going to give you just a little bit of a preview of the next time, but I think before I do get into Exodus, I think it would be appropriate. The next set of videos that I do is going to be not about reading through Exodus, starting that, but giving information about the Egyptian side of things. because this is the period of history, of course, where Egyptian and Israel history intersect. They would later on too, but there's a lot of course, I mean, they're in Egypt right now, so this is a major point of their interaction with each other until later on when Israel has its own kingdom. And of course, this is a very controversial section because the smart people today don't want to say this actually ever happened. So next time I'm going to go over, well, actually it might take a few different videos, but I'm going to go over some evidence. I'm basically going to cover some of the Egyptian side of things. This is the Israelite side of things, and go over some of the Egyptian documents. Well, not really documents. I mean, they wrote their history in a different way than the Hebrews. The Hebrews kept long documents, long scrolls. The Egyptians had monuments and idols and statues and things like that. As far as I can tell, they didn't really. I mean, they had some documents, but not to the degree of these long, extensive scroll-like things. As far as I can tell. So anyway, so next time we're going to be talking about the intersection of Israelite and Egyptian history and trying to figure out where the Israelites actually fit into the Egyptian history, and talk about the problems that our smart people are having with Egyptian chronology, which is what makes it so difficult for them to figure out how to fit the Israelites into Egyptian history, because they're basically looking in the wrong places, and we'll go over all that. But the arguments, anytime you hear someone confidently assert that this is all made up and that this never actually happened, just for now, before next time I'll go into some of the more detailed specifics about it, just they're not as confident about this as they like to pretend that they are. Okay, like it is not nearly as clear-cut evidence as is often portrayed as being. So, and in fact, the evidence that actually is there, if you care to look at it and actually analyze it properly, is pretty clearly in favor of the Israelites actually being in Egypt around this time. The problem is simply that we've mislabeled the time frame. We've messed up the chronology. We're using Egyptian chronology, our Egyptian chronology, the way that the system of chronology that we had devised for Egyptian history, to date all of ancient history, and this has led us to all kinds of problems that we basically refuse to deal with. I mean, in their more honest moments, the smart people will probably acknowledge that there are problems with the historical, chronological edifice that they've built. In their more honest moments, they probably would acknowledge it, but they're not going to do anything about it. So we'll talk about that more next time. So I won't be getting into actually reading Exodus until after I cover some of the stuff to help set the stage for Exodus and clarify some of the things that we read about here, even in Genesis. So that's that for that.